As we've done this entire process from the moment that we began to the moment that we're right now, we want to take a moment to step back and bow our heads and pray. So would you all join me for a moment? Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, you are so good, and you are so sovereign, and you are so kind, and you want so many good things for us. You want us to be your vessels, to shine a bright light into the world around us. And everything that you've been doing in the lives of the Pastor Search Committee, the lives of this church, the lives of the Browns are leading up to this point to take us that next step of that journey to do just that. And we want to just submit ourselves to you. And we just want to take a moment to thank you for the way that you have orchestrated this process and brought us here for this moment. And may we continue to follow you every single step of the way. And it's in the blessed name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray all these things. So my name's Kevin Edelblut, and I know y'all are tired of hearing my name, seeing my face, and hearing my voice. So I am delighted to introduce to you a new face and a much better voice this afternoon, Dr. Timothy Andrew Brown, or Dr. Brown or Andy. So what we're going to do today, this is going to be an opportunity for us to get to know him, his family. He's going to say a few words, and there's going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions of him. Those of you online, there'll be an opportunity for you to type in your questions as well, so please do so. Now, for ease, we've got mics up here at the front. I know that may feel a little awkward, but if you don't use the mics, then the people online will not be able to hear you. So if you would, please, if you got a question, we would love to hear it. He would love to answer it. They would love to answer it. But we'll need you to come down and use the mics. Now, if you have trouble getting down for whatever the reason may be or just completely nervous, we'll work that one out. But if you could use a mic, that would be wonderful. So that being the case, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Brown. If you'd like to introduce your family and say a few words and just...
Family to you, these are the better part of me, of course, my beautiful wife, Katie. We've been married since 2008. How many years is that? 13, I think? 17? No, I'm sorry. Anyway.
Not quite that long.
And then, of course, we have our beautiful children here, Adelie, who's 9. And some of you, I know, wonder about her name. Her name is actually from Psalm 46. It means God is my refuge. And maybe we'll learn more about that story. I'm sure we will a little later. And then, of course, we have Titus, who is my namesake. This is the reason why I have to hold on so tightly to Timothy Andrew Brown. He is Titus Andrew Brown, so he's named after me. And then, of course, we have our little cherry on the top down here, Ezra James, who is 4 years old. So we are the Browns, and we are so glad to be here to join on this journey with First Baptist Church of Starkville to honor King Jesus from here into the ends of the earth. We're just excited about the opportunity that our Lord is laying before us to unite our hearts together for His purpose.
Thank you. I know we've got some fun and excitement lined up for the kids, and you guys won't have to sit around and they didn't give you mics or anything, so we'll let you go have a good time playing outside in this gorgeous weather. Mama, would you grab them for us? So this will kind of lead into the section where Andy's going to say just a few words and just share a little bit about probably his journey. We'll kind of get into, like I said, more of the formal Q&A, for lack of a better term. But Andy, if you wouldn't mind just maybe starting off, just tell us a little bit. We've kept the church here obviously apprised of our progress and the process that we've gone through as a committee, so they kind of know the journey. What's the journey look like from Andy Brown and Katie Brown's perspective that brought you here this day?
So it's really a God story, as the committee mentioned last Sunday to you guys, and I'm happy to declare it to you. It became clear that the Lord was leading me away from my present opportunity and circumstances, and so Katie and I were candidating at a church in Alabama, and we were in the top 3 candidates for consideration at that church. And after we left that meeting, and just in 2 weeks, we did not feel confident that the Lord was leading us in that direction. And so I made a phone call to them, and I asked them to take my name out of consideration. One of the pastors that recommended me to the church in Alabama was connected to this church and understood that it was a loose connection. He attended Mississippi State, and First Baptist Church of Starkville was very instrumental in him while he was here. And so that just prompted in my mind just a Google search of First Baptist Church of Starkville. Then I found out that First Baptist Church of Starkville is in search of a senior pastor. Then I came upon the pastor search committee videos and heard a little bit of y'all's story at that juncture. And the tone and the theme that kept being repeated was, why do we not have a pastor? Why do we not have a pastor? And those are some of the same questions that Katie and I were asking. Lord, you've made it clear that we're supposed to go. Why don't we have a church? And so just feeling led of the Lord, I just basically cold knocked on the pastor search committee and submitted my resume. Followed that with another pastor recommending my resume to the committee. And that is how this whole process began to unfold with us. First Baptist Church of Starkville was in a position where they were looking for a church, looking for a pastor, asking the question, how long, O Lord? What's going on, O Lord? We were in the same juncture, rowing in the same direction at the same time. And it's really just providential, I believe, of how the Lord has got us to this point. It's been very smooth. That's the term that I think Kevin has rightly used, and that's the term that I would just echo. It's been smooth. It's been just confirmation after confirmation of the Lord's leading us. And I'll say this too. One of the most attractive things about the church was, from my perspective and Katie's perspective, us looking and seeing how the church committee was not simply seeking a pastor, but seeking God in the process of seeking a pastor. And that was demonstrated through the prayer guide that was published online. And then to come and visit and go out here and find that at the welcome desk is the same prayer guide, emphasizing this whole fact of this moment that we have is a moment for us together to draw closer to King Jesus and see what else He's going to providentially do as we seek to serve Him.
So, any questions in particular? Anybody want to come down? And Christine, do we have anything online yet, or nothing yet? Okay. Anybody? Interest? Curious? They're here. Yeah, Roy, step on up, if you would, to the mic, please.
Hello.
Katie, hello. It's great to see you and have you. I'm a retired pastor and graduate of New Orleans Seminary. And I noticed in your resume that you have a degree in systematic theology from Southeastern and a doctor of ministry in biblical theology from Southern. So my question has to do with Reformed theology, just because that's one of the biggest controversial issues within the Southern Baptist Convention, or at least it has been. Mm. And without getting into too much detail, I think one of the biggest issues is, to whom does the atonement apply? Just for a few select people, the elect? Or is it for everyone? So I would like for you just to give us your take on
Sure.
that, please.
Sure, be glad to. Appreciate the question. I think the question is important. I believe the call of God extends to whosoever. Whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. I think that in a succinct form, I would say that as it relates to the issue of free will and determinism, sovereignty and free will, I would simply say that I prefer the answer that the early church fathers gave to the question of salvation. And here's the way that they would answer it. Salvation is all of God. Damnation is all of man. So what does that mean? You say that doesn't work out very neatly or succinctly. How can both of those things be logically true? In my understanding of salvation, there is a lot of mystery. There's a lot of mystery. And I'm comfortable in my position to allowing my articulation of, I'm comfortable in allowing there to be mystery in the way that I articulate my views of salvation and sovereignty. So if you think about that, salvation is all of God. If we get to heaven, we're not going to be able to say, boy, I did a great job. If we don't get into heaven, we're not going to be able to say, God, why didn't you save me? Salvation is all of God. Damnation is all of man. And I'll extend that further to say this. I believe that one of the opportunities that we have in this present cultural moment is to articulate faithfully what we mean when we say that man is made in the image of God. Male and female, He created them. They are in the image of God. Here's what I believe made in the image of God means. Listen carefully. I believe that if you're made in the image of God, which every person is, listen to this answer. They have the capacity of relating with God. Every person is made in the image of God and therefore has the capacity of having a relationship with God. So I know that oftentimes with some of these, for example, Calvinism is that term. I don't think that the pastor should ever use the term Calvinism from behind the pulpit, because I don't think that the word Calvinism is a biblical term. I do believe that predestination is a biblical term. Election is a biblical term. But as far as some of these other platforms that people choose to use, I think oftentimes, especially in our convention, if I can extend the question for just a moment, I think that oftentimes Calvinism is a red herring for a bigger issue of people not engaging in witnessing and making disciples. Some of the greatest evangelists have been, for example, Evangelism Explosion, founded by D. James Kennedy, a Presbyterian pastor. So I think that oftentimes when we have these conversations, because there's so much tension that's often the baggage that carries with them, the mission of God is always the same. And it's that whosoever believes on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And it's for God so loved the world, everyone, that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes shall be saved. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's so funny story. So, and some of the initial feedback that we received way back when we first started, we sent out the survey. Of course, there was the, check this box and rate and score, but kind of an open-ended sort of, information. So we got a couple notes, about Calvinism and things along those lines. So the committee, we tried to brush up to the best of our ability as an accountant. What can I learn about, Calvinism and Arminianism and things along those lines? But we got into a wonderful discussion as a committee, and it devolved down into talking about peanut butter, and if we had a choice about what peanut butter, do you have free will, and are you predestined? And so we covered predestination and peanut butter in the committee. Talked about it with Andy over lunch, and it was amazing just how well he distilled it down that way. And that explanation has always resonated with me, so I appreciate the opportunity to hear that again. So
chunky or smooth, that's what you're talking, chunky or smooth.
That's right, yeah.
All right. Well, I won't tell you which one I prefer.
And I was worried, but now, so Roy threw us in the deep end of the pool, so that's great. So I'll keep us in the deep end. So here's a question that somebody had sent to me earlier, Andy, for you. So it says, we have a healthy church body with a lot of strengths, but one challenge I believe we face is that our membership does not look like our community. That can be a barrier to our ability to reach non-believers. What thoughts do you have about meaningfully and authentically addressing this? And I'm specifically thinking of racial and economic diversity.
That's a great question, and I'm glad that the question comes because it shows that there's a concern, at least from some. When I was at First Baptist Church of Atlanta, one of the greatest benefits of walking into First Baptist Atlanta was to see a strong representation of what I believe heaven is going to look like. We had African Americans. We had Latinos, Hispanics. We had all types of people, people from India, people from Pakistan, all types of people, all gathered around a solitary purpose, and that is to know Jesus and to make him known. So there are certain churches that they make their platform a social platform. And they think that by making a social agenda platform, that's how we become attractional. Here's what I believe. I believe that a church that is a gospel-centered church that emphasizes the main things of exactly the first question, that the gospel is for whosoever. Whosoever could be a black man, a black woman, a Hispanic man, a Hispanic woman, an Indian man, an Indian woman, a Middle Eastern man, a Middle Eastern woman. And if we believe that, then there's no barriers between us and them. Instead, what unites us is that common confession that we hold, that our Jesus is a Middle Eastern man who we adore and we serve. So how do we get to that position? I think clear teaching on it, as well as some intentionality on it. You know, I don't want to be known in the community as the white church. I want to be known in the community as the gospel-centered, gospel-driven church. You say, how do you do that? Well, one of the ways is probably going to relate to a question that's probably going to come up as well, and that is with preferences. There are certain things that, because of who we are, we hold on to loosely. They're non-essential for gospel expression. There are other things that are absolutely essential for gospel expression. For example, we can't join with another group in the community simply because they look different than us if they don't believe in the essentials like the Trinity. If there's a group in the community that doesn't fit the demographic of First Baptist Starkville, but they don't believe what we believe, then our not joining with them is not because they don't look like us, it's because they don't believe like we believe. And so those kind of things, I think, have to be held. And just having honest evaluation and honest conversation. And if any of you have been following the Southern Baptist Convention over this past year, you know that the conversation of race relations is tricky, it's challenging, but it's worth having. Because the gospel is at stake and how we express that gospel. So back to the first question again. It doesn't just fit in a Calvinism, Arminianism frame of reference. The gospel is for whosoever. We have to believe that.
Christine, anything on your end yet?
Yes, we do have one question from
Awesome.
online. So, what was your exact responsibility for childcare and preschool at the church where you're currently serving?
Sure. So my exact responsibility was to oversee those ministries. There was 2 directors for our, and if I'm not hitting at this question, please type back in and make sure that I'm getting exactly what you're after. But the responsibilities was we had a child life development director as well as a preschool director. And so I would we called those weekday committees. And so I would weekday ministries. And so I would oversee those. And of course, try to have the church understand that those ministries are our biggest mission field. Because we have a constant flow of people from our community that doesn't attend the church, that comes to our church Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday. So my direct responsibility was to serve as the liaison between those ministries, as well as to encourage the church body on Sundays to see those ministries as actually thriving parts of our ministry and not auxiliary parts of our ministry.
So, quick question actually for both of you. So, thinking about Newnan, Georgia, suburb of Atlanta, big city, Starkville, college town, university town. What excites you the most about coming to Starkville, and what has you maybe the most apprehensive about the transition? So, Katie, you want to start? Or
Let's see. I think I've never been to Mississippi, so this is like a whole new venture. I've never even been to the state, so, there's that. But our kids are really excited. They're ready for the adventure as well. I think living in College Town is going to be different, but fun. There's definitely a lot of ministry opportunities through the college. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I think it's going to be ready to see what the Lord does, and we're ready to be here. So.
Newnan is a town of 35,000. I know Starkville is a town of, I think, about 25,000. That's without the university. And so there's still a small town feel that Newnan has. Matter of fact, I was telling a group earlier that I'll never forget coming into Newnan again and walking to the bank one time and having someone pull into a parking space in front of me and say, "Hey man, thank you, so glad you're here. We can't believe that you're back." And then that person quickly reminded me of the way things still operated in Newnan. Even though they had increased in size, only a small group in the community made the decisions. And so basically he was patting me down to make sure that I still understood how things worked in a small town. And so Newnan is bigger. Of course, it's in that metro Atlanta area, but it still has that small town feel. And I'm excited about the opportunity for that small town camaraderie. For example, we work very close with Main Street Newnan. We work very close. I'm the chaplain for the fire department. There's a lot of community involvement that can happen, and a greater opportunity for organic relationships to be developed when you have a small town, as opposed to a larger town that may have a higher turnover rate in different municipalities. So that's really something that I'm most excited about. And to Katie's point, all this is new for us. So the apprehensiveness that we have is just those jitters of going to a new place. But then again, because of the small town, we're also hopeful that since we're not going to have any family in town, it's going to be an opportunity for us to get to know you guys all the more.
And Katie, you're saying the kids are pretty excited and seem to...
They are. Adelie is, of course, my mom has promised her a horse. So for whatever reason, that is what she's most excited about. But she did tell me on the way here, it's okay if she doesn't get a horse. So, but yes, they are. Especially Adelie. I don't know, she's ready for the adventure. She said that several times. So the boys have been a little bit quieter than she has, but they're ready, I think.
Yeah, that's what was kind of funny, because the first time that we met here on church grounds, of course, they brought the children with them. And of course, being a dad and thinking about my kids, if you were to uproot and go somewhere, there's going to be a little bit of tension. I mean, they're very comfortable where they're at. Now, they may be a little older, but even still, I mean, that's just a lot of unknown for kids. So I was expecting, a little bit of standoffishness and whatever the case may be. But memory serves, from the moment they hit the door, all the kids were just running and had bonded and glued together. And it was like they'd been friends for their entire life. Yeah. And of course, me, I struggle with the humanity and the hand of God sort of thing. And so I'm thinking, so why do these kids want to leave Georgia so bad? And it just dawned on me, this is God's divine orchestration, from the dad to the mom to 3 kids, that they are being called and they are on the same page and they're excited and ready to go. So it was just a beautiful thing to watch and to be excited about with y'all. So,
and if I may add to that, I'm excited about the Lord and His providence making my calling and election, as Ephesians says, sure. When I came to Newnan, after leaving Newnan when I was 17, I didn't come to Newnan to come home. I came to Newnan to live sent. I came to Newnan to pursue a call. And now, God's calling me to do something that He doesn't call a lot of people to do twice. And that's leave your hometown. And when I say hometown, my family's been there since some duke or lord gave them land. We've been there that long. But I didn't come home. I didn't come to Newnan to come home. I came to live on mission with God. And now he's calling me away. And I think that fact positively is going to serve the good friends that I have and my family in Newnan, Georgia, as well as prayerfully on the front end be a testimony to the First Baptist Church of Starkville. That we're on this earth to do all that we can to serve King Jesus. We're going to spend more time over there than we will here. And between the over there and the here, we're going to meet him one day. And he's going to say, "What did you do with the talents that I entrusted to you?" And I, for one, I know that there's no condemnation now that I dread. Romans 8, praise God for it. But I, for one, and I, for one, want to be able to hear him say, "You did well with what I entrusted you with."
Yeah, and speaking of talents, so where's Tom? So we have an extraordinarily talented music ministry here. And I think this came in from somebody in the praise worship band, but was curious about your take on maybe improvisational jam sessions as far as the worship, specifically guitar solos. Any particular preference or thoughts on
I
just
guess
music? Or
two questions come to mind. Number one, what's the solo? Number two, how talented is the soloist? I guess that's the first.
I'm pretty sure he's good.
Okay,
he's good.
Okay. I know that, worship is always a interesting dynamic when you have churches. You've got the contention perhaps between a contemporary or a traditional or a blended. I was talking to the staff at lunch today and just was so encouraged with Tom's philosophy that he has brought here to Starkville. What he has brought is letting the church live in that tension to make sure that we are not coming to worship based upon our preferences. So you see how all of this is leading back into the race question and even the Calvinism question? It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about Jesus. And what does he say? When he's lifted up, he will draw all men to himself. And what else did he say concerning John the Baptist, who, by the way, according to King Jesus, was the greatest born among women? Pretty impressive title. John said, "I must decrease, he must increase." When I was at Southeastern Seminary, one of the things that I was taught by example was on Tuesdays we would have the full-on choir. Dr. Nanette Godwin would be on the organ and she would blast it. It was beautiful. We'd have the choir dressed in full formal gear. And then on Thursday when we came back to chapel, there would be Matt Papa would be there with his praise band, and the choir was nowhere in sight. What were they teaching us? The substance of both of those worship services was the same. It was the gospel-centered music, all focused on King Jesus. And that rises above preference. And that's hard. I get up and I preach from the English Standard Version. That's because I prefer it. Understand. But when we can learn to delight in that tension, then I think that we have a situation where Christ is going to be honored. And if he's honored, if he's lifted up, then what's the result? He draws others to himself.
Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question? You can step up to the mic. That'd be great. Thank you.
I'm Alice Walters, and I'm one who grew up in this church and just came back about 2 years ago after my husband and I are on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ and have lived and served many places, several countries, and have come back here and are associated with the campus ministry at Mississippi State, working among faculty. But we've done a lot of different things too. But an issue that a lot of churches and a lot of Christian organizations are wrestling with now is the social justice movement and critical race theory and how that relates. I mean, just that issue. And I would be interested, well, I understand that this week that the Southern Baptist Convention, at least that all seminary professors of all the theological seminaries have come out with a firm statement rejecting critical race theory. So, but I'd like to ask you to make comments on those issues. So.
Sure. So from a technical standpoint, I affirm the Luzon Confession, and that was a confession in Luzon between John Stott, Billy Graham. Some of those were on that committee, and basically what that confession says is it directly relates to the social movement within churches. Basically, to distill the whole statement down into what the reason I reference it now is a main priority of the church is evangelism. The main priority of the church, listen carefully, and I say this with as much love and dignity as I can, is not to make the world a safer place to go to hell from, but to encourage people that the only means of satisfaction for sin is Jesus Christ. And so that's my take on the social justice. At the same time, we can't ignore social issues. James is pretty clear about true religion, caring for the widows and the orphans, not showing partiality. So there has to be a balance. But I think the balance comes when you make the priority, and that is the Great Commission. Go make disciples of all nations. And I believe with a solid, strong, and I look forward to learning this together, with a strong biblical worldview. The Salvation Army was founded by a Christian. There's an intersection between social issues and the gospel. But the gospel is always a priority. As it relates to critical race theory and intersectionality, I was at the floor, let me say this. I was there in Birmingham when the resolution came before the committee. I have friends who were on the resolutions committee. Every one of those committee members I trust. What I believe was an unfortunate set of circumstances that brought about that resolution to the floor without properly explaining to the messengers of the Southern Baptist Convention what critical race theory and intersectionality is. And unfortunately, Resolution 9 did not achieve its purpose because of the confusion that using those terms brought. Critical race theory, most of us, I'm not even certain that I have a full understanding of what that means. Intersectionality, there again, I need to do more study, but this is what I know. It's antithetical to the gospel because it doesn't begin with what is at the core of our earlier confession as it relates to determinism and free will. Humanity is made in the image of God. That's first. Not if I'm a man or I'm a woman, if I'm black or if I'm white or whatever. I am made in the image of God. That's where true Christian confession starts. Not with identity politics or any other form of theory or any other intersection. And so that's what I would say, shooting from the hip as it relates to social justice issues. The gospel of Jesus Christ is primary, and it has to remain primary. Otherwise, a church loses the mission. Listen, the mission of the church has been given to us by our commander, by our King, Jesus. It's spelled out in all four Gospels. Probably the clearest is Matthew 28. All authority has been given to me. Go therefore, make disciples, baptize, teach. That's the mission. Now the vision is how that mission is supported in its context. So what are the particular issues of intersection, and that has nothing to do with intersectionality, that's just a term. How does that mission intersect with the needs of our community? And then that's where First Baptist Starkville begins to develop and pursue vision. But the mission always remains, you don't start with vision, you start with mission. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel of the mission. The mission is clear. Tell the world about Jesus.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that we did talk about, and it wasn't the critical race theory, that was on the list, we never got there, but for me in particular, it was politics and the concern about too much. Now, this is me. This is a world according to Kevin, so be advised, disclaimer. But sometimes globally, or at least nationally, politics and church getting a little too tight and woven together. I was concerned about, well, what's your stance as far as where does politics belong, if at all, from the pulpit? And I think that was what really resonated with me, again, was I'm not an ambassador for a political party. I'm an ambassador for Jesus Christ.
That's right.
And when you start bringing politics into the pulpit, then Jesus loses, and therefore
right.
you're not achieving your mission.
That's right.
So that was just, I guess, not to belabor the point, but just extend as a reminder for me too. Just wanted to pass along. But that was something that really stuck out to me too, as far as the focus on the mission above all, beyond all. Any other questions we got out there? Yes, sir, please.
Andy and Katie, we're glad to have you here with us. And in your first opening statement, you talked about God and God calling you and kind of calling you away from Newnan. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that thought process and how God really kind of laid it on y'all's heart that there was another place for you away from that congregation?
Sure. So my reason for coming to First Baptist Church of Newnan was my desire to be under a seasoned pastor who was going to pour into me and mentor me. And I understood that he was the pastor. I understood that preaching opportunities were going to be very limited. And that's really what stirred in my heart to begin to ask the Lord to open a door. The preaching opportunities at First Baptist Newnan were in pale to my expectations. And I am so glad, if I may testify, I'm so glad I was in a situation that it would have been very easy for me to let the pulpit go. Nice salary, comfortable, our neighborhood's nice, my kids are happy, my family's there. But God would not let me go from that. Even though and I learned there was not only the value of preaching, but leading from the pulpit, which is something that I currently am not able to do. And so that is what God, making calling an election sure. When I came to First Baptist Newnan, I came with a memorandum of understanding that preaching was going to be a huge part of what I do. I wasn't going to let go of preaching. Matter of fact, I think the language that I used is that I'm a preacher. And if I don't have regular opportunities for proclamation, I'm going to die on the vine. The only reason that preaching was an emphasis was because I made it so. And I mean that. What I mean by the opportunities at the church, everything was trying to squeeze preaching out. The administrative duties, all the other duties associated. But thankfully, my God would not let me go from preaching. And then we had a little understanding that the pastor was not going to be taking retirement. And so that meant for me that I knew that I could not be in my present circumstances for another number of years. And so I began to pray that the Lord would open a door. And praise God that He's brought me here to this moment. And there'd be some days on Wednesday night when I preached the midweek service after the Monday would hit, and then Tuesday, staff meeting all day. On Wednesday, I would ask God to let the sun stand still because I needed more time to prepare. But before God, and I'll share this with First Baptist Newnan, I never preached a sermon where I didn't give it my whole heart. Because my pastor told me, Dr. Stanley, he told me, he said, Andrew, when you go to that pulpit, no matter the circumstances of your life, you give it your best. That doesn't mean that you won't feel like preaching some days or you didn't have as much time as you wanted to study. Give it your best and give it all to God. So preaching is the reason that I am asked God to open a door and what led me to this moment.
Christine? Yes.
Okay, we have a couple of questions from online. Since we're already talking about preaching, from Randy, he asks, do you feel comfortable preaching the uncomfortable or convicting portions of Scripture as well as the encouraging parts?
So if you go back, I believe in expository preaching. And you, by the tone of your question, you know exactly what that means. It means verse by verse. I believe that the sermon is determined by the text. The text determines the sermon. And so there's some cases, I give you a funny story. My first church, you'll love this. My first church, you know where I'm going, don't you? All right. Young seminary student, fresh off the boat from First Baptist Atlanta, newly ordained. I decided that I would preach through 1 Corinthians. You have to understand the demographics of my church. It was very geriatric, to use that term. A very older congregation. Well, guess what comes in 1 Corinthians? The passage about conjugal rights with one another. So here I am preaching to my grandparents about sexual relations. But I had to do it. The reason is because it was in the text. And to answer your question maybe in a more direct way, I know that there are some portions of Scripture that are challenging. I think that if you have that motivation on the front end, that the text determines the sermon, you will then let that text determine the sermon. My responsibility is to faithfully herald and proclaim God's word, not my word. His word is inspired. God's not promised to bless the word of any preacher, but He has promised and assured that He has indeed blessed and inspired His word. So my job then is to faithfully proclaim that word to the congregation.
Did you have?
Okay, we have one more from David. I've never seen believers as split as they are about things like whether or not to wear a mask and whether or not an election has been settled. How will you lead our church out of such divisions?
Be glad to answer that, and I get my phone because I anticipated this question. This is a quote from Martin Luther. Martin Luther was facing the Black Death during his time, and he was asked some of the similar questions. What should we do? Listen to Luther's response. I shall ask God mercifully to protect us. Then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine, and take it. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed in order not to become contaminated and thus perchance inflict and pollute others and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. If God should wish to take me, He will surely find me, and I have done what He has expected of me. So I am not responsible for either my own death or the death of others. And then Luther continues, if my neighbors need me, however, I shall not avoid place or person, but will go freely as stated above. See, this is such a God-fearing faith because it is neither brash nor foolhardy and does not tempt God. And so what that means for our present circumstance is if during a present time we are asked to take precautions that are temporary, then we take them. And if I may speak very candidly, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask should not keep anyone from worshiping with the Lord. I know masks are very contentious. But you know what's greater than wearing a mask? And listen, I don't like wearing a mask. If I cough tomorrow, it will be because I have been sucking in fibers as I'm trying to sing the songs. It's uncomfortable. I know that. But you know what's more important than my preference of wearing a mask? It's thinking about the individual that I met this morning who indicated to me that this is the first time that he's been out in quite a while because his wife is suffering from breast cancer. I don't want to be the reason that he brings COVID back home to his wife. So I'll take every precaution, and I'll think of others as I do it. The other thing that I would say, and I think that it was related to this question about politics, what a state that we find ourselves in, where something of confusion, a state of confusion, where something like a mask that's intended to help others has become politicized. The church has an opportunity in these moments to rise above. And I pray that we will do just that. So I'll wear a mask, I'll social distance. I realize that all of this, even though it seems like it's never going to end, it's temporary. One day we're going to get back to some sense of normalcy. And what does that mean? Well, it means not wearing a mask. It also means when I go to shake someone's hand or fist bump, it's not that awkward, what are we doing here? And looking forward to that day when we can embrace again.
So one of the things Andy had mentioned and I had mentioned as far as this particular process, when we had finally connected, that it was smooth, which was true. The other thing that I think we've mentioned a few times, it was also extraordinarily high velocity. And when it started, it went quick, which unfortunately means that we haven't probably had an opportunity to sit down and think through, well, here are some of the questions. So as he's giving you these answers, I'm sitting here thinking about what to ask next. So pardon me if these are surprises, but here we go. So one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, so this will be for each of you. So just thinking back, tell us how you met and what was it about Katie that you thought she could be the one? And Katie, same for you. Just kind of that story about meeting and the process, the progress. So however you'd like to go.
Just one look.
That's right.
We were at Truett McConnell College, and I was there after she got there. And I remember seeing her for the first time. I was in a study group in her room, although she was not in our study group. And I can tell you what she was wearing that day. She had a plaid pajamas, right? Pajama pants. Pajama pants. It was a red Georgia Bulldog shirt, and she had her hair up, glasses on, no makeup. And I thought, boy, who is that? And I began to inquire concerning her. Found out that she had a boyfriend. Found out that her boyfriend had cancer. And so then I thought, well, she is loyal to him. There's no opportunity here for us. But we developed a friendship, and that friendship turned into an opportunity for us to date. And then, well, here we are. So that's a very abbreviated part of the story. There's more to it, believe me. Great parts to it. But I was attracted to her not only because of her beauty, but also because of the quality that she possessed at Truett McConnell. She was part of a group there, several of the girls. We would hear them talk about what they wanted in a husband. I've already seen the girl, thought that she was real pretty, so I was listening. The number one priority that they had was a man to be a spiritual leader in their home. And I'll say this, at Truett McConnell College, even though I was pursuing ministry, I had Bible for lunch, Bible for breakfast, and Bible for supper. I didn't really do a lot of personal devotion time of drawing closer to the Lord. But I knew that if I wanted to draw closer to Katie, it would mean that I had to draw closer to Jesus. And so Katie is a huge reason why my personal devotion time with Jesus is what it is today. Because it all started with her reminding me that I'm to be the spiritual leader. You can't lead someone down a road that you haven't walked down yourself.
So Katie, how about you?
What about?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay.
So did he have pajamas on too, or?
I honestly don't remember the first time that I saw him. Sorry. Like I said, I had a boyfriend at the time, so that was not on my radar.
Tell us about the. Well, anyway, tell them whatever you want to tell them.
I mean, I don't know. You did pretty good. You told a lot of details. I don't.
So there was a time. We'll go here. You ready?
I don't know.
Yeah, you are. There was a time when it was obvious that we were flirting, and so much so that I had some friends that were looking out. You know, the Christian talk, guard your heart. You know, we had to guard each other's heart. And so they encouraged her to have a conversation with me. So she sat me down on the front swing at the college, and she says to me, I want to talk about us or whatever we are. And she made it very clear that there was no future for us. She was in love for the other guy. She was loyal to him. And so...
Can I call out Brandon too?
Sure, you can do whatever.
It was one of his friends, Brandon Duke, is the one that told me that I needed to explain the situation or whatever it was to make sure that he knew I was not available, was not going to be available, and those kinds of things. But of course, that lasted about 2 weeks, and then we were together. So
listen,
he didn't have to wait too long.
I was not going to be in the friend zone. I cut her off. I wouldn't sit with her. I wouldn't speak with her. If we were not going to be together, we were not.
He is an all or nothing. So I learned that early on.
And then she comes to me and she says, I played it so cool in college. I wish I was cool again. But anyway, she came and she said, we were at the Walmart in Dahlonega, Georgia, and we're walking inside. And I still remember walking past the little things that keeps the cars from driving into the front, whatever, those poles. And anyway, she says to me, yeah, my boyfriend and I, we broke up. And I said, great. What are you telling me for? You know, that kind of thing. I did know, and I'm grateful for it.
So I sense a consistent sort of smooth, high-velocity theme with you then. So when it's time, it just moves.
That's right.
What else, guys? Questions, thoughts? Yes, please.
This is a sermon topic. We'll just ask you to encapsulate it. But how do you look at from how the local church should look at Acts 1:8? I'm talking about Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, uttermost parts. So we're looking at, I'm thinking local, I'm thinking how far out you can go international. Just kind of briefly how you look at that.
Sure. I believe that the light that shines the furthest shines the brightest at home. So what good is it to go to wherever and share your faith and live like a Christian if we're not ready to live like a Christian to our neighbors? On the other side, I'll say, I learned this from Dr. Stanley, missions is what fuels church growth. Missions is what fuels church growth. And that doesn't just simply mean international missions. It means local mission. It means, and I understand the difference between evangelism and missions. I know all of us are called to be evangelists. Not all of us are called to be missionaries. I get that distinction and am reminded of that often with my IMB friends who've been on the field. But I think that if the desire for the church to grow, then missions has to be a priority. At my first church in Georgia, I had the IMB counter on the wall that I remember walking past at the Mission Center at Southeastern that would basically have a world counter where you'd walk by it and it would give the population increase, those having access to the gospel, those not having access to the gospel, and it would just click. What a reminder of the opportunity that we have been given. One missionary said, nobody should hear the good news twice before somebody has the chance to hear it once. So hopefully what that means for the local church is the local church will be the mission center to fulfill the Great Commission. The good news of God's salvation didn't start in Starkville. It started in Jerusalem, and it spread from there, And I am so grateful that some missionary brought the gospel from wherever they brought it, and it landed here. And so First Baptist Church of Starkville, as we were sharing with the deacons earlier, is not so much an institution to be maintained as it is a movement to be advanced. And what is that movement to be advanced? To know Him and to make Him known.
And Jay, kind of on to the point too, as far as the backyard, tell us again a little bit about, is it Oxford College and trying to get your foot in the door there as far as?
Sure. So Oxford, Georgia is a shrine of the Methodist Church. And I didn't know what that meant until I moved there, but basically my first meeting with the mayor, town of about 2,500, mayor and some of the other council members, was that we are a Methodist church, we're a Methodist community, and we intend to stay that way. I said, all right, thank you very much. Another nice welcome to the neighborhood. But I also knew that there was Oxford College, which is the birthplace of Emory University in Oxford. And they had close to 1,000 students. And I knew that we were right next door to that college. And God had placed that opportunity as our responsibility. Not to have another church from around the area to come, but it was our responsibility to evangelize, to engage, and equip those students. And so there's a couple of ways that we found in. One of the ways was we developed a strong relationship with that same city, and that's the city magistrates. And they called us one time and they said, hey, Oxford College needs help moving students in. Are you guys available? Now it's easier, when we've not had success going there, it's much easier to pull on a rope than it is to push it. And so we pulled on that rope. Matter of factly, it's such a beautiful thing. Oxford Baptist Church, which had, about 150 in attendance at that time, we outshone the campus activity board and everyone else because we showed up. We had tables, we had goodie bags. I will never forget Miss Winola Clavell, who is 103 years old, my oldest church member that is still alive. She's 103 years old. And at that time, she was probably in her late 90s. She was there giving out water to those incoming freshmen and their parents. And she was the standard bearer because if Miss Winola could do it at 90, upward 90, then basically what's your excuse? And then also partnering with the Methodist Church that's right on campus. We know that there's difference between Baptist and Methodist. But I had a meeting with a Methodist pastor, and I basically laid down the Nicene Creed on the table at a Mexican restaurant. And I said, if you and I can agree on these points, then we can engage that college for Jesus. And he said, let's do it. And in the 2 years, we had I don't know if this is still going on because there's always a rotation of Methodist ministers. But we were able, the 2 years that we did this, to feed probably 500 plus at a time college students and engage in organic conversations. We were already on the campus. Matter of factly, this became something that the campus put on their calendar because they were so impressed that the churches came together and wanted to say, welcome to our community.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things that was pretty impressive, or again, stuck out to me on this journey, because one of the first things we had to do as a committee was put together kind of a church profile document, who we are, size, attendance, community, things along those lines. Of course, the university is a big piece of the puzzle here in town. And that had a section in there, and I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but something along the lines of that we spend a great deal of time and energy ministering to and serving faculty, staff, students at the university. It's a big opportunity for us. So I sent the document off to Andy, just here's some more information that you may not find on the website. And his response, he had copied and pasted that section out of the document and put it in an email. He's like, this excites me.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just something that he had picked up on pretty early in the process, and again, had that experience too. So I just thought that was a great connection and fit. But what else? Christine, anything more on your side? You good? Guys, what about you? We still got time, and they're here till tomorrow, right? I mean,
That's
we've
right,
got,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And that was one of the things, too, if I may add, too, just on the other conversation concerning the university. At Oxford College, we had cultural influencers, neuroscience majors, pre-med, pre-law. These are the ones who are going to be shaping the future of our society. And God entrusted, back to the whosoever, to us for that short amount of time. And we were able to see, not anything, tremendous Welsh-type revival to break out, but we were able to see students being influenced on a regular basis by the gospel. So who knows the dividends that are going to show up when it's finally time for us to give an account to King Jesus.
All right. Well, is there anything else you would like to add as we close? Because I think that'll probably wind us down a couple minutes after 4, and we cover everything. You good?
I think so.
Okay. Well, if y'all would, do me a favor, show your appreciation for their time and they'll be here if you all wanted to swing by and say hi and, spreading out and all that good stuff that we've got to do right now. And for everybody that joined online, thank you so much for the time and the questions and for your time and questions. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. So Andy will be preaching both services in view of call. We'll follow that with the church vote. And we'll know where we're going next shortly after that. So thank you again, everybody. Have a great Saturday.
Thank you.